Hey guys, how's it going? It's Danconia and welcome to the Overwatch World Cup 2019 review. So, there's been a lot of words, I've seen it in some of the comments as well, over the Overwatch World Cup roundup this year. And I think we need to take a review of this World Cup and see whether it was as good as last year or not. So, what I'm mainly talking about here is I'm not talking about the teams, I'm not talking about the result, I'm talking about the format, the way it was held, and compare that to last year and see whether it was as good, because in my opinion it wasn't, and I think in some other people's opinions it wasn't either. So let's start our comparison with taking a look at 2018. In 2018 we had two parts to the Overwatch World Cup. The people who would take part in the qualifiers were decided by national seeding, by I believe average SR kind of like a coefficient sort of thing. And then we had four qualifiers. We had the Paris qualifier, the Bangkok qualifier, the Los Angeles qualifier, and the Incheon qualifier. All of these qualifiers would feature a group stage of 6 teams. So if I was to take an example, the Los Angeles qualifier had the United States, Canada, Brazil, Norway, Austria, and Switzerland. And out of each of these qualifiers, you would have 2 teams going through to Blizzcon, to the knockouts, to the grand finals. It's a difficult one, because in this format, very often you saw a lot of the big teams just go through, and not the smaller teams didn't get a look in, right? So again, taking Los Angeles for example, it was obviously going to be the United States and Canada that went through when they were going up against the likes of Brazil, Norway, Austria, and Switzerland. Then if we look at the other places, Incheon saw South Korea and Finland go through over Russia, Japan, Taiwan, and Hong Kong. And then Bangkok, that saw China and Australia go through over Denmark, Sweden, Thailand, and Spain. That was actually the most difficult qualifier from 2018, and was quite a bit closer, as Australia, Denmark, and Sweden fought it out through map differential to actually go through. And then in Paris, we saw France and the United Kingdom dominate fairly heavily over the Netherlands, Germany, Italy, and Poland. But what was great about these, right, is they actually, it felt like a World Cup, right? It was like all over the world. So that crowd in France cheering on the French team was phenomenal. I think it was some of the best support we've ever seen for an esports international team. It's amazing, apart from perhaps the Americans at BlizzCon, but that's obvious. Whereas, you know, from the United Kingdom's point of view, obviously I support the United Kingdom for obvious reasons, it was pretty nerve-wracking when you were taking on the French in the Paris qualifier. It was pretty blimmin' nerve-wracking. And then when you go to places like Bangkok, Thailand had their home crowd cheering them on even though they didn't make it. And obviously Los Angeles. Whatever with that one. But it felt really nice. It felt like it was in a good place. Fast forward to 2019 then, and things changed massively, and mainly I think it's down to the Overwatch League. The Overwatch League was a lot longer this year because it had 20 teams instead of 12, and that meant that it was going to take up a much bigger chunk of the year. Those qualifiers in 2018 were held about a month before BlizzCon, I believe, or in varied ways anyway, because they couldn't all be held at the same time. All the games happened at different times, so you could watch every single game, which was really, really cool. This year, it did feel kind of rushed. I think this is a general consensus of people, that it did feel kind of rushed. The good thing about this year is a lot more people got the chance to experience BlizzCon. But also, some people missed out because of funding issues. So there's kind of a give and take when you change things like this. So this year, if you've missed it was literally a week ago, but if you missed it, we had the preliminaries, which were held literally the Thursday before BlizzCon, a day before BlizzCon kicked off, where you'd see a massive load of teams, like some teams we haven't really seen at the World Cup before. The thing is, and I'm talking about like the likes of Colombia and Latvia and people like that, we haven't really seen them at the World Cup before. Problem is, teams like Brazil, Egypt, Chile, Switzerland, Romania. They were on the books to actually be involved in these preliminaries, but due to funding issues, they couldn't go. So that's actually really sad. That's really sad that they didn't get to experience that just because they couldn't fund it. And not every country is going to be able to fund it. Yes, it's alright for the United Kingdom or Australia or Sweden. Like the Republic of Ireland, for example, ran a massive PR campaign. It was really, really successful. But that's how they got to BlizzCon. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been able to stump up the cash to get all the players out there and all that. So, I think it's unfortunate that some of these teams, like, you look at a roster from, say, like Argentina or Brazil, they're actually fairly good rosters that could have held their own in the preliminaries, but just due to funding issues, they couldn't go. And I think that's something that, in the future, perhaps needs to be sorted out. In terms of how do you sort it out, that's a difficult one, because can Blizzard, I mean Blizzard's a very big company, obviously, can they fund all of these teams? Yeah. Easier said than done. Easier said than done. It's a difficult one. It's a difficult one, and I'm not going to go into that. So, we had the preliminaries, and it was great to see all these teams in action. Problem is, you couldn't watch all these teams in action because all of the games were on at the same time. And this had to happen because all of these preliminaries had to happen on the Thursday before BlizzCon. So, that's a shame. I think you have to say that's a shame. I can understand why it had to happen, but if the qualifiers were, say, a couple of weeks or a month before BlizzCon, you could have stretched it out a bit. You could have done the qualifiers over a few days, and a lot more of it could have been watched, and a lot of these smaller teams and the players that are like not getting to the pro level right now or not at the top end of Overwatch esports could have had a lot more exposure. And I think that's the key point here. These were online preliminaries. They weren't on a stage. They were just, if you wanted to watch them, you had to watch a stream. So if you're a scout from, give a good example, Boston Uprising, who were looking for quite a few players, or the London Spitfire even, you can't watch all these streams at once because, well, you just can't. There was like 4 games going on at once. You can't keep an eye on all of that. So, I think that's an area for improvement. Can you improve that? I don't know. With the schedule of the Overwatch League, I really don't know whether you can improve that these days. Difficult one. We can go on to that in a minute though. So then with the preliminaries, we moved on to the group stage. And the group stage took place on the first day of BlizzCon after this opening ceremony. And I thought, yeah, that's cool. We had 10 teams at the group stage, 5 per group. So that format actually kind of works for BlizzCon. Thing is, it was still kind of online preliminaries, if you see what I mean, in terms of its format. They weren't on stage. So the teams that got knocked out, Sweden, United Kingdom, Russia and Canada, they didn't get to experience the Overwatch World Cup stage this year, which I thought was a missed opportunity. Who else was using the Overwatch World Cup stage? Who else was using it on that day? I don't think it was being used. So, that's a bit of a shame. That's a bit of a shame. Last year, I believe we went straight into the knockouts because I think we had the quarterfinals on one day and then semi-finals on another day and then the final on another day and the third place playoff on another day. I think it was divided up over the 3 days. But this year, I think that's an opportunity missed. I think the group stage could have taken place on stage, and it would have been nice for some of these teams to have more stage time. Some of them did not get much stage time, and some of them didn't get any stage time at all. So, again, opportunity missed. And when we're looking at the preliminaries and the group stage, the casting and the broadcasts have to be called into question. So, they took place, you had the Overwatch League stream, I'm talking about the preliminaries here. You had the Overwatch League stream, you had the Play Overwatch stream, you had the Overwatch Contenders stream, then you had 2 streams called OWWC 1 and OWWC 2. Those were the streams that covered the Overwatch World Cup. The only way you would really know about Overwatch World Cup 1 stream and Overwatch World Cup 2 stream is if you went to the Overwatch League site and went to the Overwatch World Cup tab where it would link it, or you went to the Overwatch directory on Twitch. I don't believe Twitch advertised those two streams on the front page. They may well have done for Play Overwatch, Overwatch League and Overwatch Contenders, but I don't think they did it for the other ones. So those matches kind of fell by the wayside slightly because they were on slightly unknown streams. Again, that's a drawback of putting all of the matches on at the same time. Then you move to the group stage. Again, matches were taking place at the same time. Not keen on it. But then you lost. I don't think they put any of them on OWWC 2. But what they did is they showed them on Play Overwatch, Overwatch Contenders, and Overwatch World Cup 1. And then Overwatch League was kind of covering it all. Again, I'm not sure whether that's the best move. Although it did enable like more action for like the desk with Golden Boy and that. I just don't think the broadcast setup for this year's, especially the preliminaries and group stage, really worked. I don't think it was brilliant. So I think that could be improved for 2020. Moving on to the knockout rounds then, which actually did see the Overwatch World Cup stage. And again, improvements to be made. So in 2018, we saw 8 teams in the quarterfinals. This year, we saw 4 teams. Because the top 2 seeds from Group A and Group B, which were United States and China, this year got a bye into the semi-finals. Whereas they didn't in 2018. So in 2018, you had the United States, the United Kingdom, South Korea, Australia, China, Finland, France, and Canada all competing in the quarterfinals because they qualified. It was the top 2 out of each qualifying group. So you had 2 from each, and you had 4 qualifiers, i.e. 8 teams. So I thought that gave us more action on the Overwatch World Cup stage than 2019 has, although that could have been offset by a group stage that took place on the Overwatch World Cup stage. You see what I mean here? So with that, do we really want to see teams get byes through to the semi-finals? I'm not sure that's the kind of thing, in my personal opinion, I want to see. But the way to fix this is you could still have the same format, have the group stage, just make 6 teams in each group. Have an extra 2 teams go through from the preliminaries, and then have 4 teams go through from Group A and Group B, and have 2 teams go out. That's the only change that would need to happen there. It would mean you'd have an extra 2 quarterfinals, which would be pretty cool, I think. All in all, I think the Overwatch World Cup felt very rushed this year. And I think a lot of people also feel that way. I also thought there was potential for it to really pop off in terms of a lot of teams we haven't seen at the World Cup before. But unfortunately, due to funding issues, we didn't see some of those teams. And I believe also maybe Team Thailand. I'm not sure what exactly went on there, but I think it might have been visa issues as well, which we saw, I think, a couple of years ago with Team China when getting into the USA. Again, that's kind of out of Blizzard and the team's control in some respects. But this year, it's what I think it is, and also like the Overwatch World Cup website was taken down before the World Cup, and it just became one page on the Overwatch League site. Overall, the Overwatch World Cup this year has felt like it's okay. If you were to go to Wikipedia and you were to look at the tier they give the competitions that Blizzard put on, it's a premier Blizzard competition, right? It didn't feel like that. It felt like tier 2. It felt like, no disrespect, contenders. It didn't fit, and I believe the Overwatch World Cup should be on a par with the Overwatch League. It should be right up there. It's a premier competition. So it felt like that last year. I don't think it felt so much like that this year. it felt a bit dumbed down, it felt a bit rushed, and I think that's mainly due to the timings of the Overwatch League. Now, in terms of whether they can actually fix this, that is a problem. Because when you look at the Overwatch League schedule, they obviously start second week of February, and they run all the way until the second week of August. Then you've got to take into account that the Overwatch League will have playoffs. If they keep the same format as they did this year, they'll have a play-in tournament and they'll have a playoff tournament. So that takes you well into September, maybe early October. Then you're looking at BlizzCon, first week of November 2020. That gives you at most a month between the end of the Overwatch League and the beginning of the Overwatch World Cup at BlizzCon. Where do you fit those preliminaries in? Where do you fit those qualifiers in? And also give time to have these teams be built, have their committees started up, have their players selected, have tryouts, and all that has to happen before you go to the World Cup. So, the Overwatch League is fantastic, but it has had, I think, a detrimental effect on the Overwatch World Cup, simply because there is one way you could fix this. Not have the Overwatch World Cup finals at BlizzCon. Have the Overwatch World Cup finals in the middle of December or something. But that's not going to happen. The Overwatch World Cup finals, I'm pretty sure, will always be at BlizzCon, and I can understand that. Otherwise, there would be no Premier Overwatch competition at BlizzCon, and I don't think they'd ever go for that. So, to fix that, you'd have to move the Overwatch League. You'd have to push the Overwatch League back a month, which means starting it in early January. And that hasn't happened, looking at the schedule for the Overwatch League for 2020. So, next year, we could be seeing a similar format Overwatch World Cup. Then they just need to really sort the broadcasting out, because I think it was a bit below par this year. That's not necessarily the caster's fault. I think that's just the way that Blizzard have set it up. So, there's a lot of improvements to be made on this year's Overwatch World Cup, which is something I didn't expect to be saying, to be quite honest with you. Although I did make a video a couple of months back questioning whether the World Cup would even happen because of the way the Overwatch League schedule was. But I think there's some improvements to be made here. I think I personally believe the 2018 format was really good. I don't believe, looking at the schedule, that the World Cup can go back to that format. So, they need to sort out the broadcasting, they need to sort it out, perhaps have the preliminaries take place over the week going into BlizzCon, instead of the day before BlizzCon, and then do it that way. Because I think that would make things a lot nicer for the people to watch, and a lot less hectic perhaps even for the committees and the players that are involved. But that was the review for the Overwatch World Cup 2019. We may take a look at a few other things in the coming week or so. I will get that out as soon as possible. But for now, thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you liked it, give it a like, subscribe if you're new, and I will see you in the next video. See you then.